On the wedding night, someone had a room with bamboo flowers, but I had to sharpen ink all night for the emperor's dog. So I secretly thought he definitely couldn't, but I didn't know he could hear my heart. Actually, I just traveled here not long ago. Just because she wore a purple dress, she was almost beheaded by a tyrant. I hate purple the most. Today all the maids wearing purple dresses were killed. Hearing this, I secretly raised my head to look, thinking to myself, what a bitch, even the palace maid wearing a purple dress won't be spared. This dog emperor truly treats human life like grass, has an erratic and unpredictable personality. Just when I hadn't fully digested this cruelty, he suddenly turned to look at me. His eyes were cold. What did you just say? The tyrant suddenly turned around and stood against the light. A tall shadow falls over me. I knelt on the ground, holding my breath, my heart beating like a drum. Your Majesty, I didn't say anything. So heaven and earth. I hadn't even opened my mouth yet when a dead silence filled the main hall. The palace maids and eunuchs were scared and knelt down. Even I was shaking like a leaf, thinking I was about to lose my life. Who would have thought that tyrant suddenly bent down and lifted my chin? Before my eyes is a face so cruel that it makes people stop breathing. His eyes were as deep as spring water, shining and enchanting people's hearts. Wait, does this dog emperor have such a beautiful appearance? Who spread the news that he was old and ugly? Obviously jealous of this stunning appearance. The tyrant looked at me for a long time, then suddenly smiled and said in a deep voice, "You agree with me. Fong will be Hu Tan." So I became the tyrant's only concubine, because all the other concubines were killed by him. The harem is huge, only me and the Queen Mother are left. The Queen Mother lives in Tu Nin Palace all year round, does not like being disturbed by others, and even ordered me to excuse her from visiting. From then on, my life was extremely happy, sleeping until noon every day. Open your eyes and order food. 18 palace maids take turns serving. Even when we go out, we don't need to take off our pants ourselves, someone will help us. Living in modernity is far from as happy as living here. While I was smiling happily, thanking God for his care, the tyrant came. The reason he came was to force me to impregnate me. Oh, is there such a good thing? Looking at this cruel appearance, this trip won't be a loss. I was so happy that I wanted to laugh out loud, but on the surface I still pretended to be shy. My concubine, please help the king change his clothes. I wonder what his figure is like. Let me secretly take a look. But Tyrant Quan quickly retreated, avoiding my hand. His eyes flashed with caution. Lai Duk Tone, bring your things in. Lai Song Song hastily carried in a mountain-high pile of trophies. Then run away, not forgetting to close the door. Bao Quan cleared his throat seriously and said, "There are too many chapters written today, I haven't approved them yet. Dear concubine, do you want to help me sharpen the ink or do you want to rest? Working for the emperor is my concubine's destiny. When I meet a handsome man like this, ask me to sharpen my ink or sharpen my hand, I will accept it." But when a stick of incense passed, he still forced me to continuously grind the ink, not letting me rest for a second. At this time, my hand was so tired and bitter that it was about to fall off. Even the donkeys in the production team are given some grass to eat while working, but we have nothing. It's too much. Tomorrow I will hang myself outside the door and turn into a demon to wrap around you, you dog emperor. Bao Quan was approving the chapter when he suddenly stopped for a moment. He rubbed his belly, his voice was cold, he was a little hungry. Lai Song Song, deliver dinner. Soon, the metal table was cleared, replaced by a table full of delicious dishes. Immediately, I started eating, no longer remembering anything about serving or not serving that tyrant. Suddenly, Bao Quan reached out and used his long fingers to gently wipe away the food stains at the corner of my lips. He glanced at me, his tone cold. "Looking at you eating, I thought this was your last meal." His fingers slid across my neck, cold as a snake's tail, brushing across my skin. I was startled and immediately suspected that he wanted to kill me. But think again, after all, we have to eat full food first. Even if we die, we can't starve to death. After eating and drinking, Tyrant finally allowed me to go to bed. I blinked, looking at him innocently. "Does your Majesty want to rest with me?" Bao Quan smiled without smiling. "Do you still want to continue sharpening your ink?" Hearing that, I immediately crawled into bed, closed my eyes tightly and pretended to sleep. Who would have thought that after pretending for a while, I actually fell asleep, to the point where Tyrant left without me knowing. But I confirmed that he is absolutely sick. The next morning, I remembered what happened last night and felt extremely sad. It's not that I think too much, but the Tyrant is really sick. After that, for 7 consecutive days, he came to my palace to process the commission. The whole harem rumored that I was favored, just waiting for the day I would become pregnant, be crowned queen, and become the mother of the world. But I just want to laugh coldly. Damn it. My hand is about to be destroyed. This so-called favor, anyone who wants it can come and take it, no matter how handsome he is. I can't serve him anymore. I couldn't help but have a dark speculation. This dog emperor definitely can't, that's why he deliberately came to my place to spend the night, hiding from everyone. No wonder the whole harem is so big that I'm the only concubine. He was definitely afraid that the crowd would reveal his vulnerability. Wait, what's that noise? I was suspicious and tilted my head to look over. Your Majesty, did you hear anything? Tyrant Quan coldly glanced at me. Before he could say anything, he suddenly stood up, his long sleeve covering his clenched fist. Looks like he just broke the brush. After that, he didn't say a word, just ordered Light Song Song to pack up the metal and take it away. I sighed. I told you, he's really sick. Who's that cold face to scare anyone? Then there were 2 pieces of news. Good news, we don't need to grind ink anymore. Bad news, Tyrant took me to the palace banquet. At this moment, he hugged me and sat in the highest position, receiving hundreds of eyes following me. I broke out in a cold sweat, feeling uncomfortable, so I secretly placed my hand on his stomach and said in a low voice, Your Majesty, can I sit down? Tyrant smiled faintly, bent down, his breath blowing in my ear. What's wrong? Do you not like being with me? His hand placed on my shoulder, then slowly slid down to my neck, gently squeezing, as if at any moment he could break my neck. I immediately obediently leaned into his arms, wrapped my arms around his waist, and cooed, There's no such thing, the king is so naughty, this concubine likes to stick to the king the most. But if you have the bravery, can you take away your hand that's on my neck? Hoo-hoo, I just want to be salted fish and not eat the royal salary. But wait, this emperor dog's waist is really small. As I thought, my hand immediately tilted in an indescribable direction. Tyrant Quan was suddenly startled and quickly avoided my hand. He coughed lightly, then put a plate of grapes in front of me and said nonchalantly, Eat, don't move your hands or feet. I was not willing, regretfully retracted my small hand, and looked down without anger. I caught a glimpse of my father and sister thanking Tuet. Me was sitting in the row of chairs under her father's eyes full of satisfaction. But my sister is different, she looks at me with jealousy and unwillingness. She must be regretting it now because she was originally in Tien Palace. After all, she is Nu, the daughter of the main family, and I am just an outsider, the child of the concubine. Low status, not worth mentioning. My mother passed away early, and my sister often plotted to harm me and falsely accused me of stealing her things. My father hated me, saying I came from a vile background and was vile in nature. So he threw me into the woodshed for 3 days, starved for 5 days, without food. There were even times when I was so hungry that I had to fight for food with my sister's dog. Until half a month ago, rumors spread in the palace that the Tyrant military department Gwen intended to eliminate the founder of the country. My father was frightened and immediately thought of offering his daughter Tian Kung as a hostage to save his life. But my sister, Ta Tuet Ni, of course did not dare to go. After all, this tyrant just ascended the throne and killed 3,000 people, who wouldn't be afraid? That's why my father remembered me, the lowly daughter he never valued. That day, just as I had just traveled to this world, I was forced to sit at the table and eat a plate of pork trotters and 2 bowls of white rice, in exchange for my volunteering. After all, in Dai Suan, women from poor backgrounds can only be concubines for the rest of their lives. Sooner or later I will be forced to marry some old man, buried my whole life in a small backyard. If that's the case, then why don't we go into the palace and make a bet? Now look, don't my father and sister both have to look up to me? Just as I was sinking into memories, suddenly a shrill scream rang out, "There are assassins! Quickly protect the king!" Whoosh! A sharp sword cut through the wind and flew towards the highest position. I didn't have time to think. I instinctively pushed the tyrant out to block the sword. So Gwen couldn't believe it and glared at me. His dark eyes reflected my pale face. "It's over, my life seems to end here. In the end, my 9 clan should not have come so early." Thinking of this, I immediately cried, threw myself at So Gwen, and hugged him tightly. "Your Majesty, don't die. I can't lose you. If your Majesty dies, I will hang myself right here in the main hall. Together, we will be hungry ghosts." The tyrant was pinned down by me, coughed a few times, rolled his eyes and sighed. "My dear, if you don't stand up now, I will really be crushed to death by you." Only then did I realize that he was completely uninjured. It turned out that the Kim T Nguyen Jayap on his body blocked that sword. Not only was he safe and sound, but he also calmly pointed out the mastermind behind the assassination, Envong. Envong is the royal uncle of So Gwen, the younger brother of the first emperor. At this time, So Gwen looked at the old man, his eyes flashed with sadness. "Uncle Hong, you watched me grow up with your own eyes. How could you be so cruel as to want to kill me?" Envong laughed coldly. "Since you ascended the throne, the number of people who have died at your hands is countless. How many loyal servants and soldiers, how many heroes founded the country? You have killed more than half. You are brutal, cold-blooded, heartless. Are you still worthy of being an emperor? This king killing you is acting on behalf of heaven." And Vong's voice echoed throughout the main hall, as steadfast as a nail. But the next second, poof! Truong Kim and So Gwen's hand pierced in Vong's chest. He said faintly, "Uncle Hong, your voice is too loud, too noisy." The space in the main hall immediately fell silent. No one dared to say a word. So Gwen slowly pulled out the bloody sword and leisurely walked in front of me. He stared at me, then slowly asked, "Ai Phi, do you know how treason will be handled?" I swallowed my saliva and replied in fear, "Your Majesty, it will be executed in Lam Tri." After that, I quickly changed my tone, sobbing and crying, "Hoo-hoo, I was suddenly scared just now. Luckily, the king is okay, so lucky." So Gwen raised his eyebrows and smiled slightly. He raised his hand to my lips and gently touched it, then slowly caressed my cheek, saying in a deep voice, "My dear, you did very well. In the future, if you are in danger again, just do the same. Because in my eyes, your life is more important than mine." "Mom, I'm scared, I really am." These words give me goosebumps. I tried to stay calm and coddled him. "Your Majesty, I'm so scared, can you give me a set of armor?" So Gwyn smiled softly and firmly refused. After that, he directly made me a noble concubine, and also allowed me to move into Canton Palace to live with him. Now the whole world knows that he loves me to the point of madness, even giving up his life for me. This news made even the Queen Mother unable to sit still. She immediately summoned me in the temple. The Queen Mother looked at me with a smile in her eyes and said, "What an interesting person, no wonder the Emperor is so fond of you." She smiled and stroked my hair, softly saying, "But you know better than anyone how the Emperor's temperament is. Loving you is one thing, but one day he will hate you and kill you." Her words were gentle but cold. Then, she lifted her hand and placed a small porcelain bottle in my hand. "This is the pure spring of the sun, colorless, odorless. When it comes to water it immediately melts. If you drink it you definitely won't be able to live. You and the Emperor eat and drink together, they are the easiest to attack. Who would expect me to act for the sake of humanity and for the sake of greatness?" I closed my eyes and said nothing. If it were half a month ago, I probably would have nodded in agreement. But now, you old lady, go away. So Gwyn's killings were all corrupt officials, even the girls who were eliminated from the selection were only sent to the cold palace. Party and dance, but no one dies? The maids, eunuchs, and people all liked him, but there was no time left. The person who really messed up the world and brought disaster to the people was this woman. Seeing that I did not answer, the Queen Mother immediately turned her face away. With this attitude, does it mean that you don't want to save the great Chang from a miserable situation? I immediately smiled. "My concubine, how dare you do this? This is a noble mission. I will definitely be devoted." The Queen Mother was pleased to take off a jade bracelet from her hand and give it to me. "This is a token that has been with someone for many years. I give it to you today." She laughed as she chased me away, but she absolutely did not expect that. As soon as I stepped out of Nin, I went straight to the Ngu study room. I put down the ceramic jar, took off the jade bracelet, then pushed the door open. Crying loudly, "Your Majesty, I want to accuse the Queen Mother of treason. She wants me to poison and kill your Majesty. I don't understand court politics, but I know whose thigh is the most secure to hug. No matter how powerful the Queen Mother is, she cannot compete with a tyrant who killed 3,000 people as soon as he ascended the throne." So Gwyn looked at me, a flash of surprise flashed through her eyes, then burst out laughing softly. He raised his hand to brush away the paper on the table, and it was the decree deciding whether to kill the Queen Mother or not. He looked at me, his eyes full of interest. "My dear, I am really surprised by you." That night, So Gwyn did not order the palace maids and eunuchs to retreat, but instead drank wine with me in the courtyard of Canton Palace. He asked me, "Ai Fi, do you know why I hate the color purple?" I didn't answer, just quietly listened. So Gwyn smiled indifferently, "Because the Queen Mother likes purple the most." I have also heard that the Queen Mother is not So Gwyn's biological mother. His biological mother passed away shortly after giving birth to him. The immortal emperor immediately gave him to Lam Fi to raise. Who would have thought that a year later, Lam Fi became pregnant and gave birth to another prince? From then on, So Gwyn's life turned into hell. Lam Fi was afraid that when So Gwyn grew up, he would compete with her son for the throne, so she tried to trample him, forcing him to eat his brother's leftover rice, forcing him to kneel in front of his brother as a footpad, forcing him to be beaten and humiliated by his brother. She wanted him to understand that no matter how high he climbed in the future, he would always be the dog at her son's feet. But ironically, among the 6 princes, only So Gwyn is the best. He patiently endured each step to take the throne. At that time, Lam Fi began to panic. To save her life, she personally killed her biological son, then forced So Gwyn to establish herself as Queen Mother. From then on, the two were like water and fire. Even in the recruitment process, all the beautiful girls locked in the palace were arranged by the Queen Mother. She wanted to use them to anger So Gwyn, causing him to kill innocent people, thereby strengthening his reputation as a tyrant. If you can't kill him, you have to make him disgusted to the point of madness. At this time, So Gwyn leaned on my shoulder, lazily sighing, "The Queen Mother always misses my position. She doesn't even hesitate to collude with Envong." Unfortunately, Envong was too hasty and ruined her plan. She immediately turned to her so she could kill me. He raised his glass of wine, his tone was gentle, "The Queen Mother will definitely not let you go." He bowed his head, hot breath blowing on my neck. "Ai Fi, do you believe I can protect you?" I was a bit stunned, then slowly nodded. So Gwyn looked at me for a long time, then suddenly smiled softly. He gently used the tip of his nose to rub my neck like a big cat being pampered. "I won't let anything happen to her." "Min Chao," he called my name directly, his tone was gentle and persistent. Really sounds very pleasant. But I waited 4 days without seeing the Queen Mother take revenge. On the contrary, my sister, Tuet Ni, led a group of people to rush straight into my palace. She plopped down on the chair and arrogantly ordered, "You must yield to me for 3 days. Quickly find a way to make the Emperor favor me." Huh? What is she thinking? I rolled my eyes and sighed helplessly. "Sister, you look so ugly, I didn't expect you to be so beautiful." The Emperor's legs grow on him. He can pamper whoever he wants, this palace can't control it. As soon as my words ended, a familiar voice rang out right at the palace door. "Who says love can't be controlled?" So Gwyn slowly walked in, sharp eyes scanning the crowd in the palace. Tuet Ni immediately stood up, bowed, her eyes full of charm, her voice soft. "Goddess Ta Tuet Ni pays homage to the Emperor. I know you are my beloved concubine's older sister." So Gwyn sat down next to me, her eyes were full of laughter but her words were cold to the bone. "If your sister wants to enter the royal concubine's palace, you won't help. That's too bad. How about letting her be a palace maid next to you, serving you from now on?" As soon as these words ended, both Ta Tuet Ni and I were stunned. Immediately, she panicked, her face turned white, and was about to speak out. But at the same time, hot breath blew into my ear, so Gwyn leaned close and said in a low voice, "You can teach her as much as you like. If she dies, just say she fell and hit her head, no one will prosecute her." I almost burst out laughing, trying to keep a serious face. After So Gwyn left, I sat cross-legged on the chair and lazily ordered, "That maid, come and punch this palace's feet. Remember to kneel down and not raise your head." Ta Tuet Ni's face turned red with anger, but she still gritted her teeth and knelt down, raising her hand to punch me. I nodded in satisfaction, then frowned slightly. "My strength is too weak. Do you want to die? I'm tired of it." I waved my hand again coldly. "Go pour tea." Ta Tuet Ni hurriedly went to pour the tea, but when it reached me, I raised my eyebrows and asked, "Why is it so hot?" The palace maid next to her immediately understood and slapped her with her hand. "Brave! Are you trying to harm the lady?" Ta Tuet Ni was frightened and said tremblingly, "I don't have any. This is my first time doing this and I'm not used to it yet. I'll go change another glass right away." She took the opportunity to lean close to my hand, lowered her voice and gritted her teeth. "Min Chao, don't be too harsh." I laughed coldly, my eyes full of sarcasm. "Sister, didn't you treat me like that before?" You made me punch my feet, poor T as your maid. You often slapped me, saying it was so I could learn how to serve my husband and mother-in-law in the future. Now you can't stand being treated like that? Tatuetni trembled, her face stiffened, she just stammered, ah. But I didn't let her continue. I swung my hand and slapped her straight in the face. She fell back to the ground. I stood up, looked down from above and said coldly, "Maid, you should call yourself a servant." After a few days as a palace maid, Tatuetni became visibly thinner. Her red face did not fade, but she still did not give up hope. This time, she cried and denounced the emperor. "Please, master, take care of me. Your Highness often beats me and mistreats me. I just like this part of my beloved concubine. You suffer a little, but my beloved concubine is happy. So sister, shouldn't you feel happy because of her?" Hearing this, her eyes widened, her speech was speechless, she clearly couldn't believe it. I guess she probably wants to scold So Gwyn for being a psychopath. Because I often secretly scold you like that. Tatuetni gritted her teeth, bowed her head hard, and sobbed, "Please, your majesty, please grant me the grace to leave the palace. I miss my father and want to go home." So Gwyn heard that, glanced at me, the corners of her lips curled up. "My dear concubine has not been back to visit the general's palace for a long time. Then I will go with you on a trip." I'm stunned. What else is this dog emperor planning? Sure enough, So Gwyn brought with him several thousand cam guards and marched to the general's palace in an aggressive manner. From a distance, I thought there was about to be a foreclosure. My father, General Tatan, as soon as he saw So Gwyn, he immediately knelt down on the ground, his face drained of blood. This minister visits the emperor. I wonder what happened to the emperor visiting the general's residence and the army. So Gwyn reached out and pulled me into his arms, waving his other hand. The guards immediately dragged Tatuetni to kneel in front of my father. He calmly said, "Ai Khan, I will give you. Choose one of two daughters, which one do you want to keep?" Not only my father and sister were stunned, but even I gasped. What's wrong with this dog emperor? My father's face turned pale, he trembled slightly, and cautiously replied, "Min Chao and Tuetni are both my daughters, of course I want to keep them both." So Gwyn curled her lips and smiled faintly, "Since Ai Khan can't choose, let me help you choose. From now on, Min Chao is only my beloved concubine, and no longer has any relationship with the Ta family. You only have one daughter left, Ta Tuetni." My father's expression immediately changed. "Your Majesty, do you want to protest the order?" So Gwyn laughed coldly, her voice casual, "If you resist, you will be beheaded on the spot." The words came out lightly but made my father kneel on the ground, not daring to cough another word. Tatuetni was officially thrown back to the Ta family, and I was dragged onto a carriage by So Gwyn and escorted directly back to the royal palace. On the carriage, I looked at him confused. "Your Majesty, why do you want to sever my relationship with the Ta family?" So Gwyn slowly took my hand and gently rubbed my fingertips. In different tone, the old general has recently been very close to the Queen Mother. I am afraid that she will be implicated, so it is better to completely eliminate this threat. Furthermore, I heard that you are not living well in the Ta family. He looked up at me, his eyes as deep as an autumn lake. "It's fine if you don't need that tattered place. If you agree, the royal palace is your home." At this moment, I hear my heart pounding so fast that it feels like it wants to jump out of my chest. Dog Emperor, it is very difficult for me not to be moved by such a person. I don't understand why he suddenly squeezed my hand. His eyes were deep, his voice was a bit hoarse. "My dear, can I take care of you tonight?" Before I could react, he pulled me straight into Canton Palace. In the room, the candlelight flickered, emitting a warm but dim light. I unconsciously clutched So-Gwen's shirt, a bit tense. If you are timid at this time, will you be laughed at? But the problem is that I have no experience, all my knowledge comes from previous movies, and I'm still racking my brain to remember the hot scenes in the movies. Suddenly a numb feeling came from my neck. He gently bit my neck. Long, slender fingertips slid across my eyes, gently covering my vision. His voice was hoarse and vague. My dear, be more focused. The truth has been proven, So-Gwen is completely sick. He is very healthy, and he also understands very well what I like. Everything he knows. After that night, gold, silver, jewels, silk, brocade, and rare antiques rushed into my palace like flowing water. There's also a decree appointing me queen. Light Song Song smiled until his eyes narrowed and bowed his head. Congratulations, congratulations, Your Highness. The Fong Hao Grand Ceremony will be held on the full moon day of next month. His Majesty said he wants to organize the most solemn grand ceremony for you so that you will never forget it for the rest of your life. I can't forget, I really can't forget, because on the day of the great ceremony, I was chopped into pieces by the Queen Mother and thrown into Nin Palace. At this moment, I was stuck firmly on the cold ground, facing the Queen Mother. She looked at me, her eyes sharp, her voice cold. I used to think you were a smart person, and even had a lot of expectations for you. But it turns out you're just a stupid person, daring to make fun of me. I blinked, trying to buy time. Now that the palace maid finds out that I am not in the palace, she will definitely notify So-Gwen to come and save me. So I pouted, pretending to be unjust. I have been wronged. Every day I put medicine in the Emperor's dog tea, but he is still alive and well. Queen Mother, is the medicine you gave me expired? Unexpectedly, the Queen Mother was so angry that she almost choked. Do you think anyone is as stupid as you? At this time, a eunuch rushed in, his voice urgent. Empress Dowager, the Emperor has led troops to surround Nin Palace. The Queen Mother clenched her hands and ordered, close her mouth and throw her into a dry well. After that, the palace maids dragged me to a dry well in the backyard. The well was not very deep, but when I was thrown into it, I was in so much pain that I almost fainted. Damn it. It's true that you bite a torn shirt. This old woman can't fight back if you hit her, you can't provoke her if you tease her, I can only curse her for getting older. I was still wiping my hands when I suddenly heard So-Gwen's voice from above, Mother, my beloved concubine. The Queen Mother replied in a cold voice, Grandpa I took it out of the palace, to a place where you will never find it. She laughed coldly, her tone was sharp. As long as you write a letter today declaring yourself seriously ill, abdicating the throne, handing over power to AI family will immediately return her to you. Otherwise, in this life you can only go down to Hong Tuan to find her. So-Gwen laughed coldly. The Queen Mother really worked hard for the royal position, did not hesitate to collude with Vong, spread rumors that Tram was a tyrant, and even ordered old General Ta to hold me back outside, taking the opportunity to steal my queen. Whoosh! The sound of the sword being drawn rang out, and the entire Nin Palace immediately fell into deathly silence. The Queen Mother was panicked. You! What do you want to do? Who do you dare to touch? Are you not afraid that I will take the life of that vile woman? So-Gwen calmly replied, Don't worry, Mother, I will definitely find Min Chao again. Bang! A dull sound rang out, the sound of a sword piercing through the body. I lay at the bottom of the well, helpless to look up. Dog Emperor, you killed the Queen Mother, so who will save me? Suddenly the light overhead was obscured, and a tall, familiar figure slowly bent down. The way he looked at me was still the same as the first time I met him, except this time his eyes sparkled softly. the corners of his lips curled slightly reflecting gentle light. Min Chao, I found you. So Gwyn killed the Queen Mother to calm the court. He announced that the Queen Mother had colluded with traitors, and he executed him on the spot. As for Tatan, my father, he actually secretly submitted to the Queen Mother, so the whole family was beheaded. Tatuetni also could not escape the outcome. But I'm okay, because I cut ties with the Ta family long ago, thus escaping this disaster. I became the first Empress of Dai Suan, was carried into the main hall right in the Emperor's heart, and celebrated the great ceremony of Fong Hao. Actually, it was because my legs were cramped from falling into the well, so during the great ceremony, I sat on So Gwyn's lap the entire process. My next good day is 4 months later. I originally thought that I could return to the life of salted fish, lying without a salary like when I first entered the palace, but no. Tatuetni, right before the night of being beheaded, escaped. She disguised herself as a palace maid and infiltrated Kinnin Palace. Just as she was about to shout for someone, she laughed coldly. Sister, I know a secret about the Emperor. Don't you want to hear it? I narrowed my eyes. What do you want to say? She curled her lips, her tone sarcastic. The Emperor doesn't love you at all, he's just taking advantage of you. I'm not surprised, because I already knew that from the moment I was brought to the palace to meet the assassins. I knew I was the fish that So Gwyn used to lure the Queen Mother. He deliberately showed me his weakness, causing the Queen Mother to be unable to restrain herself and attack. From then on, he had a good reason to eliminate her. He was so good to me that it was unreasonable to the point of not being like a tyrant gradually climbing from a sea of blood. But I'm not angry, because I'm also taking advantage of him. Actually, I know he can hear my heart. The interrogation during Tu's audition that day, and his appearance while I was hiding, there aren't too many coincidences in this world. So, I deliberately thought about the past to check if he could help me escape from the Ta family. After determining, I proactively coordinated the play with him. Therefore, the so-called favor is nothing more than mutual exploitation. But I did not expect that Tatuetni's words would be heard by So Gwyn herself. Outside the palace, someone discovered the assassin and cried out in panic. The guard quickly rushed in to arrest Tatuetni. The candlelight swayed, reflecting on the tall figure standing outside the main hall. So Gwyn stood there, hidden in the darkness. I couldn't see his face clearly, but his hands were clenched into fists, showing that he had heard everything. I tried to stay calm and coughed softly. Your Majesty, do you know what I was thinking? So Gwyn walked in, her eyes deep. Indifferently replied, do you think I want to kill you? I curled my lips and slowly said, so, does your Majesty want to kill me? He looked at me and smiled softly. How could I have the heart to kill my fairy sister? I was shocked, I hadn't heard this word for a long time. When I was 6 years old, the immoral emperor organized a Thoyen banquet, and Tatuetni and I followed my father to the palace to attend the party. But Tatuetni intentionally soiled my dress, wanting me to be rude in front of the royal family and anger Long Nan. At that time, because I did not dare to enter the palace, I secretly hid outside. By chance, I saw a small, skinny boy sitting cowering in the grass. Only red eyes, timidly looking at the trays brought into the palace. He was skinny and disheveled, like a pitiful little rabbit. For some reason, I wanted to tease him a bit, so I quietly walked around behind him and suddenly spoke, "Who are you?" He was startled, his whole body trembled, and he asked again, who are you?" I raised my chin and replied eloquently, "I am a fairy in heaven, descending to earth." His eyes lit up. "Sister Fairy," he gulped softly and said in a low voice, "Sister Fairy, I'm very hungry. Can you give me some food?" I didn't want to give it to him. Even though I had a few pieces of breakfast secretly hidden from the carriage in my sleeve, I was still hungry. Since childhood, I have been used to being hungry. I want to keep it to eat gradually. But perhaps he saw my hesitation and smiled innocently. Actually, I'm not too hungry. This is the first time I've met a fairy sister. You're really beautiful. He said that, but at that moment his stomach growled and gurgled. His face immediately turned black and he whispered, "I'm sorry, Sister Fairy, my stomach is not good, it often grumbles." This kid is clearly starving to death, but he's still pretending. I know this feeling well, because I've heard my stomach growl like that many times. Finally, I sighed and held out my hand. "Close your eyes." He obediently followed. I took out a small towel from my sleeve and wrapped a few pieces of cake inside. I originally intended to choose the smallest piece, but looking at his yellow and sick face, I ended up taking the largest piece and putting it in his hand. "Next time we see you, don't be hungry anymore." He opened his eyes, looked at the cake in his hand in shock, then happily raised his head and thanked Sister Fairy. Many years have passed, and I have long forgotten this matter. But now, so Gwen step by step came closer and knelt down next to my bed. He gently touched the red mole on my ear, his voice low and gentle. "That year, the fairy sister gave me a piece of cake to help me survive that summer, but I don't know your name, I only remember that there was a small mole on your ear." He squeezed my hand tightly, his palm was large and warm, completely covering my hand. The first time I met her, I didn't know why I could hear her heart. I immediately ordered her to be appointed Sun concubine to use her as bait to lure the Queen Mother. Because I can detect any signs of betrayal from her and can control her. He stopped, his voice was softer, but when he saw the mole on her hand, he changed his plan. "I wanted to ensure your safety and not let anyone really hurt you, but I didn't expect that the time I spent with you would make me completely go away." He bowed his head and whispered in my ear, "Min Chao, I like you. Whether it's using or being used, we're even, okay? Now, if you want freedom, I can give it to you too." His voice lowered a bit. "I once said, if you want, this palace is your home. If you don't want it, you can leave at any time." He raised his eyes to look at me, his tone teasing, "I have prepared both a carriage and money for you." Is he trying to keep me? Then, he laid his head on my thigh, closed his eyes, and gently pressed his face into my palm. He whispered, "You know, I lost my mother when I was young, no one taught me how to love someone, and no one taught me how to be loved. I don't know what to do, but I want to try once, try to keep you." This statement is extremely dangerous. This is a tyrant, an emperor who killed thousands of people as soon as he ascended the throne. He is absolutely not a soft-hearted person, but at this moment, he gently rubbed my palm like a child, making me unable to push him away. At this moment, So Gwen opened her eyes and looked at me with clear and enchanting eyes. "Min Chao, whatever you want, I can give it to you." I looked at him thoughtfully for a moment, then laughed. "Then I want a decree. If one day you betray me, or I feel disgusted with you, I can freely leave." As soon as he finished speaking, So Gwen immediately stood up and quickly walked to the writing desk, a holy edict right in front of me. After that, he directly hid Noctai, took both the decree and Noctai and gave it to me. He curled his lips and smiled, "Next time you want to order something, you can write it yourself." I looked at my left hand holding the holy edict, I looked at my right hand holding Noctai, my whole body was stunned. "Aren't you afraid that I will usurp the throne as female emperor?" So Gwen raised her eyebrows, bent down to kiss my forehead, and smiled in a low voice. "Then I will be your code." He lifted my chin and whispered softly in my ear, "Min Chao, in this life you are the only person who can control me. I stand on sea, but thanks to her I no longer feel cold." He smiled, his eyes full of gentleness. "I have acquired the most brilliant pearl in the world." I bowed my head slightly, gently kissed his forehead, and whispered, "Thank you, so Gwen. Thank you for giving me a home as an exile."